Um, all right. Hello, Professor. Today I will be talking about the anterior and the posterior pituitary glands, which make up the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is actually made of two separate structures of different origin. The larger anterior pituitary gland, which is called the hypophyseal pouch, grows from the pharynx, um, and is separated completely by week 8. The posterior pituitary gland grows from the hypothalamus, and by week 16, both of them are enclosed in bone and are so closely intertwined that they give the appearance of a single gland, even though they are two different glands. Um, Before I get into the specifics, it is important to know that the hypothalamus issues tight control over both pituitary glands in order to fulfill its role of hormone regulation and distribution within the endocrine system. How exactly it does this is what we'll be talking about. Firstly, I'll be starting with the anterior pituitary gland. Since it didn't grow from the hypothalamus like the posterior, it is not connected by nerves, but by a sense or uh, just a group of blood vessels called the hypophyseal portal system. This is a capillary system in which the hypothalamus secretes hormones through that enter through primary capillaries within the hypothalamus and travel through the tract and diffuse through secondary capillaries within the anterior pituitary gland. Um, the first hormone I'll be talking about that gets released by the hypothalamus is gonadotropin releasing hormone. This hormone goes through the tract, touches the gonadotropes part of the anterior pituitary, and it stimulates the release of follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. These hormones travel all the way to the gonads, which is pretty far for hormones to be traveling from the brain from. Another hormone, or the next hormone I'll be talking about, is that gets secreted by the hypothalamus is the corticotropin releasing hormone. This hormone goes to the corticotropes part of the interior. Um, and it stimulates the release of adrenocorticotropin, which travels to the adrenal gland, stimulating the release of their hormones. We won't be talking about what these hormones actually do in this video. The next hormone I'll be talking about released by the hypothalamus to the interior is the thyroid releasing hormone, which which travels to the thyrotropes part and stimulates the anterior pituitary gland's release of thyroid stimulating hormone, which stimulates the thyroid to release its hormones. The next one I'll be talking about is the growth hormone releasing hormone, which stimulates the release of growth hormone. It travels to the somatotropes of the interior, and this growth hormone travels to long bones and just bigger muscles throughout the body. The last one I'll be talking about is the prolactin inhibitory gland, which also referred to as dopamine, is different from the others because it is being released constantly. And only when it's not released is when the interior is signaled to produce prolactin, which is used in milk production for moms. Um, Now, before I get into the posterior, I think it's important to talk about how exactly the hypothalamus is secreting these hormones, and it does it with nuclei, which you can see here. Nuclei, firstly, are just a group of cell bodies with tracks, which are just bundles of axons. These nuclei make specific hormones, and they travel down the tracks through and either to the hypophyseal tract for the anterior pituitary gland, or they just travel straight to the posterior pituitary gland. Um, So now I'll get into the posterior pituitary gland, which this gland is actually made of nervous tissue, which is just like what your other brain matter is made of. So it's not really a gland, but anyway, um, like I said, since it originated from the hypothalamus, it is connected to it by nervous tissue. So it can it goes through a tract called the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract as opposed to the hypophyseal tract. But the nerves, the so firstly, the nuclei produce hormones that travel down their tracks which again are just bundles of axons, and the hormones just sit waiting in the posterior gland. And while they wait here until they are given the signal, which travels down this very same track, which is the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Um, and once it gets the signal, then it releases the hormones, but they're not being made when it gets the signal. They're already made. They're just sitting there. So the first hormone I'll be talking about is antidiuretic hormone, which is released from the sopratic nucleus, which is this one right here. The physiological triggers of this hormone release include low blood pressure, plasma osmolality, and just pain. High plasma osmolality, by the way. This release is inhibited by high blood pressure, low plasma osmolality, and alcohol. And this hormone, the antidiuretic hormone, travels to the kidneys and the blood vessels. The next hormone I'll be talking about produced by the pituitary or the posterior pituitary gland is oxytocin, which is released by the paraventricular nucleus, which are these two. Only one goes to the posterior though. This hormone is triggered by bathing or by birthing process, suckling and ejaculation, and it travels to the uterus and the mammary glands. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.